Welcome to the kingdom. I'm Chris, and this is Good Enough Gaming. Howdy folks, and welcome to this video where we are going to take a look at a very interesting question posed by a viewer. A while back I asked the community in general what kinds of topics they would be interested in seeing videos about, and a lot of you submitted some really great ideas, so I've got them on a list here. And if I make a video based on your question or idea, I want to give you credit for it. So while you're watching any of my videos, if you come up with an interesting idea that you would love to see a video about, please put it down in the comments below, and who knows, maybe next week's video might just be yours. So this week, we're going to take a look at a question posed by Samuel Aylmer 804, who asked, how do you know when it's time to quit or walk away from a particular game or from the hobby in general? And I thought that was a fascinating question because we seldom think about it that much, even though most of us have probably at one point or another walked away from a game or paused. Even myself, there were a couple years where I didn't do any tabletop wargaming. So we always think about how to bring people in, how to expand, how to continue, how to grow a gaming community, but how often do we actually think about when is it time to walk away? So I thought that was a fascinating question, and so I thought, let's make a video out of it. Now, when we talk about walking away or quitting a game, I don't mean testing a game, maybe buying a starter set, playing it for a bit, deciding it's not for you, and then moving on to try something else. I mean quitting a game that you have played for years, maybe even decades, and have sunk thousands of dollars and thousands of hours into, and that for some reason you suddenly, or maybe over a longer period, start to distance yourself from the game and eventually stop. So upon thinking about it, I imagined and came up with a few different reasons, some of which are in our control, some of which aren't. So let's take a look at some of these reasons. Here are 6 reasons that I think of why you would stop or pause wargaming. Number 1, it's not fun anymore. I would say this is the most important reason, and allow me to introduce it with a bit of a personal example. Yes, it's story time. So I used to play World of Warcraft, and I started with the initial game many years ago, and it was amazing. I would grind solo, I would go on those big 40-player raids, I would hang out with my brothers online, everything in between. It was fantastic. But when I finally hit level 60 and started doing the big stuff, like the big raids, there was quite a trade-off. I remember evenings where I would wait for 45 minutes to an hour to try and put together one of those big raids, and if it went off, great. But if it didn't, it meant I had just spent 45 minutes basically doing nothing, to then find out I would continue to do nothing. I noticed I would have to block off massive chunks of time on my weekends and evenings. We're talking 4+ hours, sometimes even longer, unless I just wanted to play and grind solo. And even if I got into a big raid, between the wait to get it together and then the raid itself taking hours and hours and hours, I just noticed there was a lot of time being put in, and I could never guarantee that I was going to get something out of it. And the final straw came after a week of logging in every single day to complete daily quests, that I suddenly realized these have become chores. I didn't enjoy doing them, but I couldn't miss a day because then I would lose whatever carrot was being dangled in front of me at the end of the week for completing the daily quests. It suddenly occurred to me that for me, playing WoW had become a daily chore. It had become a task rather than an escape from daily chores. So I quit. Now, after many months, maybe even a year or so, I started feeling the itch to play again. So I jumped back in, and it was great. Many of the things that I didn't like had been fixed or adjusted, so I got several months of playing time in, but then I started to hit that same wall of feeling like I was logging in because I had to, not because I wanted to, so I quit for the second time. And to make a long story short, I would go through this cycle of joining, playing, getting tired, and quitting, but every time I did, the space between quitting and getting back in got longer and longer, and the amount of time I did play when I got back in got shorter and shorter. And eventually, I quit one time and just never went back to it. Now, while that's about video games, war games aren't that much different. It's a hobby that we sink time and we sink money into. And hobbies are supposed to be fun. If it's not fun, then it's time to take a break. Maybe not quit entirely, maybe just a temporary pause, give it some time to cool off, maybe to start to miss it, and then come back and try again. And if it's fun again, it meant you were just burnt out or needed a little bit of time away. But if you're getting tired of a particular game system, or maybe an aspect of the hobby, and you take a break and you come back and you're still not enjoying, then you either didn't take a long enough break, or maybe you've just kind of finished your run with this particular game, for now or possibly for a lot longer. Now, one important caveat here. Having a bad game and getting as salty as a pretzel is not the same as losing interest in the game. Now, when I moved to where I currently live, there was only one game store nearby, and for the first 3 or 4 months, when I went weekly, I got beat almost every single time. And that obviously isn't fun. Nobody likes to lose every time they play. But I still liked the building. I still liked the painting. I liked the initial idea of setting up a game, looking at the terrain, the possibility of defeating my opponent. It just wasn't working out when the dice started rolling. But that's how I knew I wasn't done with the hobby. I was just tired of losing all the time. So I learned to build better lists. I learned how to do better tactics. I talked to the people I always lost to and said, hey, what could I have done better? And while trying to avoid becoming a meta player, I, to use the phrase, got good, or got gooder, if such a thing is possible. The point here was, don't confuse a rage quit with growing tired with the hobby. So number one reason why you should quit a hobby, you're not enjoying it anymore. And you shouldn't sink time and money into something that you don't have to, that you don't enjoy. Reason number 2, found something new. If that last reason was kind of the most unfortunate, that you grow tired of a game and you kind of lose interest in it, this one I would say is the opposite. It's the better. You quit playing a game because you found something new, more enjoyable, or otherwise superior to the other one. So, for example, again, I can only speak mostly to my own experiences, but I imagine a lot of you have had similar ones. I used to love playing games like Risk, Axis and Allies, and Stratego, or however you want to pronounce that. But I always felt like there was something missing. I kept buying board games, war board games, looking for the thing I was missing. But I didn't know what it was I was missing until I walked into a hobby store and saw some guys playing Warhammer Fantasy, and then I found it. It was the models. It was the 3-dimensional tabletop filled with terrain. It was throwing handfuls of dice, moving figures around a board, all of that good stuff. That's what I was looking for. So that's when I started playing Warhammer, and it scratched the itch that those other board games weren't quite hitting. So I didn't play them as much anymore. Then when I started getting tired of certain parts of Warhammer, I found one-page rules. And now one-page rules really seems to scratch that large-scale wargaming itch that Warhammer used to provide. But I am finding that in terms of my skirmish itch, that one-page rule skirmish isn't quite as satisfying as it once was. So now I'm testing out other skirmish games to see what I'm looking for. So it's not that I've grown tired of it, it's just I'm wondering if there's something better. Moving on, the third reason why you might pause or give up playing a particular game or give up on the hobby entirely is kind of a tragic one, and that's no community. This one's sad because it's often out of the player's control, but it most certainly prevents them from playing. You could be an absolute die-hard fan with all the game expansions, 12 different armies, a rock-solid grasp of the rules, but if there's nobody to play against, you're out of luck. Now, I've heard many times from players at all the different places I've lived and the game stores I've played at that they stopped this game and picked up that game because, quote, that's what everybody plays around here. So I know this is a bit circular, but it's still a very important facet of gaming. If you want to play some kind of war game and the only store around you has a great big Marvel Crisis Protocol community, that's probably what you're going to end up playing, even though you might really want to play Frostgrave, or, well, you'll always find a 40k community. But the point is, you can't play if there's no one to play against. And again, this is a little bit circular. But one of the reasons why Warhammer games, Age of Sigmar and particularly 40K, are so big is because you can almost guarantee a gaming group exists in almost every town of any decent size. There's a group because the game's big, and the game's big because you can always count on a group, so people will always join it. But if you play smaller or lesser known games, and you can't get anyone at your local gaming store to test it out or to join you playing, you might have to put that game on the shelf for a while and play what everyone else is playing. Reason number 4 is kind of closely tied to reason number 3, and that's the game, or the local gaming venue, goes out of business. I mean, anyone here play Warhammer Fantasy Battles? Why did we stop playing? Because Games Workshop killed it, like a spider on the kitchen floor. It wasn't making Games Workshop enough money, so they shut it down and replaced it with Age of Sigmar. Now, sure, there were still some places where Warhammer Fantasy continued, but that was because you had a local community big enough to keep it going, which kind of takes us back to that previous reason about having to quit for lack of a group. The same holds true if your local gaming store goes under and there isn't an alternative. So again, speaking from experience, about a decade ago, there were only 2 local gaming stores in my area that did miniature war games. One in the north, one in the south. The one in the north went out of business, and the one in the south was an hour drive away one way. So for a time, the only way I could get a game in was at someone's house, and then you're limited to what they play. Plus, you're also limited to how many people do you know well enough that you go over to their houses to play war games. Now, a short time later, Games Workshop opened an official Warhammer store just down the street from where the previous game store went out of business. But you can only play GW games with GW models there. So again, if you're a Warhammer player, that was fine. But if you wanted to play anything else, like historical games or other game systems, I either had to make the trek an hour away down south of the river, find a local group, or just not play. So another reason why you might have to give up a gaming system is either because the gaming company itself discontinues. Like Project Z, I played Project Z, but Warlord Games has discontinued it. It's done. If I find someone with the models or someone who wants to play with the models I have, I can get a game in, but otherwise, that game's gone. Moving on, there's the 5th reason, which is kind of the flip side of the previous one. The previous reason is when the game company or your local gaming store goes out of business. This next one is the game's too expensive for you as a player. So another reason to consider pausing or quitting a game is because you just can't afford it anymore, or because you don't think the investment is worth the money. And while Games Workshop gets a lot of rightly deserved criticism in this area, it's not the only company that does stuff like this. This isn't the same as a game not being fun. This means it is fun, you just can't keep up with it. So for example, I used to play a little bit of trading card games a while ago, but I stopped because I didn't want to have to buy entirely new decks, invest in entirely new expansions every few months. Now, absolutely, Warhammer codexes do the same thing, but I still had the joy of building and painting a model that I could always look at, display, and maybe one day play again. To me, the investment in trading card games didn't give me what I got for the same investment in a miniature war game. So for me, it wasn't necessarily that they were too expensive, it's just that the money wasn't worth the cost, or the product wasn't worth the cost. Whereas if, for example, you want to get into miniature wargaming, GW will probably price you out pretty quick if you stay with it long enough. They raise their prices every year. When they release new stuff, the prices are very, very high, and you might find you just don't have the money to do it anymore. Again, from personal experience, way back when GW released the first Horus Heresy models with the Betrayal at Calth box set, I bought into that because I was in the middle of reading the Horus Heresy novels, and more than anything, I wanted to build an Alpha Legion army. So I bought 2 or 3 of those Betrayal at Calth box sets to build a nice big 30k army. And that was all well and good. But over time, more and more stuff came out for Horus Heresy, but it was all Forge World, which meant ridiculously expensive. You're talking $100 for a squad of 5 guys. You're talking tanks that could obliterate you from the battlefield but cost like $200. That was too rich for my blood. So I got out of playing 30k simply because I didn't want to pay the cost to stay in. Fast forward several years later, now many of those kits have plastic, and while they're still pretty expensive, it's not nearly as bad as it was under Forge World. I'll give another example. I was really interested in Marvel Crisis Protocol when it first came out, and the starter box set was a great deal, $100, and you got, it was something like almost 10 models, I think it was, plus you got some terrain and scatter stuff. It was great. But then when I wanted to start adding to my collection and finding I was going to be paying 20, 30, 40, $50 for a single model, I was out. Now, I get the reason behind the high prices. It's the same reason that Games Workshop charges $40 for a hero model. People only need to buy one. And so, rather than being able to sell thousands and thousands of guardsmen to recoup the cost, every player who plays guard only needs one Castellan Crow, only needs one Commissar Yarrick. And so, in order to make sure they recover the cost for the design and the production of those models, Games Workshop is going to charge a premium. Similar kind of situation with Marvel Crisis Protocol. I get it. Nobody needs to buy 10 Wolverines to fill out their army. That makes sense. I'm just saying that I decided if I had $40 to spend, I could get a box of Wargame Atlantic miniatures and purchase an entirely new unit. 30 figures, rather than one model for Crisis Protocol. And then, one more experience. Back in 2019, I worked as an on-call for Games Workshop. So I was an employee. I got the employee discount, which was a very, very nice discount. And over the 2 years that I worked as an on-call, I bought over a dozen new armies. And I'm not exaggerating this here. I counted, and I had at least 12 2,000-point armies between 40K and Age of Sigmar that I purchased in those 2 years. But the moment that I stopped working there and lost my discount, I stopped purchasing Games Workshop models. At 50%, they were worth it. At regular price, they weren't. Simple as that. So a reason you'd get out of a hobby is it's just not worth the money anymore. And the last reason why I could think you would want to get out of a particular game, or maybe the hobby in general, is you max out. You reach the end. I'm a child of the 80s and the 90s. And back when you bought a video game then, not a license, there were no such things as DLC. The game had an ending, and when you finished it, you tended to stop playing it. Maybe once in a while you'd get to itch to pick up the game, enjoy a particular level, just to hear the 8-bit music again, whatever it was. But for the most part, you'd gotten everything you wanted out of that game, and it was time to move on. It's not that the game wasn't fun. It was that you got everything that it had to offer, and so you wanted to move on and try something else. I would keep the game, though, because it was almost like a trophy case, and we all know what that's like. Hunters put animal heads on the wall. Well, gamers have their shelf of all the games that they own, and especially the ones they played and completed, at least back in the 80s and 90s. So, the reason I would move on from a game is I'd finished it. And I can see the same thing happen in Wargaming. Maybe you finally finished your model collection, or at least you bought all the models for that particular army that you wanted. Maybe the game went to a new edition and you just didn't feel the need to go with it. I mean, going back to the video game example, I have owned pretty much every Nintendo console from the 8-bit NES all the way up to the Switch, and every PlayStation console all the way through to the PS4. But when the PS5 came out, when the Wii U came out, when the Switch 2 comes out, I don't think I'm going to get them. It's not that I don't think they'd be fun, and it wasn't that I thought the price was too high, although the Switch 2 has kind of pushed the limit on that one. I just didn't want to take that step. I kind of maxed out what I wanted to get from those particular consoles. And I still play the old consoles quite a bit, but I get most of my video game fixes from PC. And I look at the cost of a next-gen console and think, you know, for the price of that console, I could get an entirely new army. And I could get a lot more hours out of building, painting, and playing that army than I would probably get for that console. And I have found that I just don't feel the pull to buy those consoles. My PC scratches my video game itch, and my focus now is more on tabletop gaming rather than video gaming, generally speaking. And yeah, sure, I have many, many fond memories of playing games like the OG Mario Kart, the Super NES one. You know, it's really sad. I heard that the new generation, when you say OG Mario Kart, they think like the one for the Wii. No. Super Nintendo Mario Kart, playing GoldenEye on the 64, playing Twisted Metal on the PlayStation. Those were fantastic. They are still fantastic and fun. But I get more enjoyment and satisfaction from painting and from wargaming, so that's where I direct my time and resources. And I could see the same thing happen on the flip side. Someone might just get really tired of building and painting models, struggling to find a game when they could sit down at their computer or at their console and instantly join a game with a bunch of people and enjoy a couple hours playing. So the last reason why you might want to give a game a pause is you kind of maxed it out. It's not that it's bad, it's just that you found something to move on to. So, what do you think? I'm sure I've missed a couple in here. What are some of the reasons you've come up with that are either tangential to the ones I've mentioned? For example, we mentioned no community, but there's always a chance that your gaming community for a particular game kind of sucks. So then you're going to give it a pause until you get some new people. What did I miss? Put it down in the comments. Also, if you have any other cool ideas that you would like to see a video about, put that in the comments as well. And until next time, keep your dice on the table.